We get to start off this game, so let's see what we got here. And okay, we've got turn 1 Thoughtseize, a Bolt, and a Nahiri. Seems pretty reasonable. We can just simply play Black Cleave Cliffs and Thoughtseize on turn 1 to get things going here. And it looks like we are playing against Abzan, so this could be a pretty grindy matchup. Looking at our opponent's hand, the Tarmogoyf is going to be pretty hard to deal with. The Liliana in our opponent's hand. Our opponent's got a lot of good cards in hand, only 2 lands. So we just kind of have to think about how we can best attack what our opponent is doing. It's pretty likely that our opponent is going to Inquisition our Bolt here. Our best card in hand is Nahiri, so I think in order to protect Nahiri, we probably want to take our opponent's Thoughtseize. But we are definitely vulnerable to dying to the other stuff our opponent has in hand if we do that. We could also just take the Tarmogoyf, but I think I'm going to take the Thoughtseize. Try to protect our Nahiri. It is definitely an important spell in our hand at the moment. Of course, we could very easily just draw another one, and then we would definitely regret this play. So yeah, expecting to see the Inquisition. That's going to take the Bolt. So we're pretty much drawing off the top like our opponent is, but our opponent is going to have access to playing Tarmogoyf this turn. And we did just basically draw a brick here, so sometimes this is how the discard matchups go. You play a discard spell, it's just like whoever has more gas, and our opponent has a Goyf. So naturally we drew second Nahiri, so now we completely regret the choice of Thoughtseizing our opponent's Thoughtseize so that they wouldn't Thoughtseize our Nahiri. And now it looks like our opponent has access to Liliana of the Veil. So that's going to come down here. And it's going to force a discard, expecting our opponent to discard Lingering Souls. So we've got a couple of options here. I kind of like discarding the Nahiri, although that would make the Tarmogoyf our opponent has in play bigger. So we could also just discard the Ghost Quarter. I guess that's fine. So yeah, we're just going to discard the Ghost Quarter here. And we'll see if our opponent elects to attack here with the Goyf or not. If our opponent does attack, we're definitely going to play Nahiri to get rid of the Goyf. But it looks like our opponent didn't fall into that trap. But now our draw step is Liliana of the Veil. So we can just play Lily and get rid of this Goyf. So I like that, but we're still in danger of dying to the Tarmogoyf. So we've got 2 Nahiris. We're going to be forced to discard one of them here. And our opponent has 2 cards in hand plus Lingering Souls in the graveyard, so we're definitely behind. I would be most worried about our opponent's Liliana in this situation. And we drew a copy of Lingering Souls. Interesting. So we have to figure out if there's going to be a way to get our opponent's Liliana off the table. I think we want to go ahead and uptick our Liliana here and then just simply flash back the Lingering Souls. There's also some argument to discarding Nahiri and just hard casting the souls. Yeah, I mean, that's reasonable here. But yeah, let's just go ahead and discard the Lingering Souls. Although I guess our opponent is going to uptick their Liliana anyways. So we should just discard the Nahiri and hardcast Souls. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So we're going to discard the Nahiri. Alright, our opponent discarded a Murderous Cut. And now we are Hellbent. So if our opponent basically draws a brick, a land, we are in a reasonable spot. We are going to be able to pressure our opponent's Liliana by attacking it, and that seems fine. But I'm expecting... Okay, so it looks like our opponent realizes that and is now ticking down Liliana here. And this path is pretty annoying. So, yeah, the path is going to set us back because now our Liliana can get attacked and is now going to die here. But this at least means that our opponent's Liliana is not going to ultimate. And we actually drew an interesting one here, Crucible of Worlds. So we can actually go ahead and cast that here, which I like doing. And we have a Ghost Quarter in the graveyard. So we can start trying to sort of get rid of our opponent's land systematically. And I don't even mind just using the Ghost Quarter here. So we're going to just do that on our opponent's Temple Garden. See, our opponent might have a basic Plains in their deck. So that's fine. We can get the Plains on our next turn. But it looks like our opponent once again had a pretty big top deck here with Kalitas. So we're both top decking. Our opponent's top decking a little bit better than we are right now. So the Thoughtseize is basically not going to do us anything here. I like attacking with our 2 spirits at our opponent's Liliana, just because one of our outs to Kalitas is drawing a Liliana of our own. And if our opponent has no creatures in play, we can potentially make our opponent sacrifice this Kalitas. So let's go ahead and get rid of this Plains here. So that should cut our opponent off of white mana in case of some sort of white spell. We don't know if our opponent's playing a card like Siege Rhino in their deck or not. So there goes the Thoughtseize. It wasn't doing anything for us. And our opponent is smartly passing the turn. And it looks like our draw step here was actually a Ghost Quarter, which was not a good draw. So we're just going to play it and pass here. And it looks like we might lose the game to this Kalitas plus Liliana combination here. That Scavenging Ooze is actually really good because it's going to be able to eat our Ghost Quarter in the graveyard. We'll see if our opponent sees that play. Yep, there goes our Ghost Quarter. So unless we draw, we basically need to draw something big here, or else we're just kind of dead. Our opponents play this game pretty well, I think. Although I'm not sure how I feel about this attack. We're definitely going to take it, but we want to draw now something that's going to get rid of the Scavenging Ooze or the Liliana. So Dreadbore is a pretty big draw here. So the question is, what do we get rid of on our opponent's side of the board? Because our opponent's got, if we just get rid of the Lily, we're still facing down Ooze and Kalitas, which still isn't great for us. So I think we want to actually Dreadbore the Scavenging Ooze and try to attack this Liliana of the Veil. It's not great for us by any means. But it's at least going to allow us to apply a bit more pressure on the Scavenging Ooze and then get our Ghost Quarter engine going. So let's try this. It may not work out. That's certainly true. But it's worth a shot. So now we can still continue to use our Ghost Quarter on our opponent's lands. And get in with our Shambling Vents to at least make it so the Liliana ultimate is not about to happen next turn. We certainly still could get Liliana ulted and lose the game, but I think that this play of getting rid of the Lily was probably our best option. But it looks like our opponent has drawn out of this, essentially. Peeled the Lingering Souls. And we're back to square one. Alright, so our own copy of Liliana the Veil. That's not going to do a whole lot here. So we can go ahead and cast it, definitely. And I think we just make our opponent sacrifice a spirit here. This is really not where we want to be. But play it out. See if there's anything at all that can happen that can go our way here. We are getting rid of our opponent's lands, but unfortunately the board is very unfavorable. We're both losing to the creatures and to this Liliana, which keeps ticking up and ticking up and ticking up. There's a Shambling Vents. So I'm guessing our opponent is going to go ahead and get rid of our Liliana here. That would make a lot of sense. We'll see if we have one more good top deck in us. Wall of Omens. Okay, maybe that's a redraw here. No. Alright, let's go to game 2. Interesting game. It felt like we were basically behind from the start, and we were never really able to catch back up there. So, looking at the sideboard options, we do have access to some grindy cards, for sure. The discard spells are good early in the game. They're not so good in those sorts of top deck situations. So, in many ways, it's nice to have a deck that is good at top decking. Anger of the Gods is an interesting sideboard option. It does get rid of Lingering Souls tokens, which is nice. If our opponent has Lingering Souls advantage. But other than that, if our opponent is playing Dark Confidant, it's good. We didn't see Dark Confidant, though. Similarly, Lightning Bolt is only okay in the matchup. So there's a bunch of cards we can shave on. I actually like bringing in another copy of Crucible of Worlds and one more copy of Ghost Quarter. And since we're doing that, we can sideboard out a land if we want to. I don't think it's necessarily that we need to. So I think we can go ahead and just shave some of our discard. The Thoughtseizes, we don't really want to be taking damage from them. We're fine with shaving a bolt or two here or there. Relic of Progenitus is another sideboard option that we have to shut off our opponent's Goyf, or to shut off Lingering Souls. So I'm fine with boarding in one. I think we still keep in 2 Angers in case our opponent has Lingering Souls advantage. And we're going to keep it as in this configuration for game 2. And we are going to be on the play again. So I like this hand. Definitely a keep. We're going to need to draw a third land. And once we do draw that third land, that's going to enable us to cast the most important spells in our hand, which are the Painful Truce and the Crucible of Worlds. And we also boarded in a 26th land, so we're definitely favored to draw that third land. So hopefully we get there. And we're just going to go ahead and grab a Sacred Foundry here. So we have all of our colors. Alright, we did not draw the third land, but we drew Inquisition, so I think we just go ahead and fire it off. And we see what our opponent is working with here. So 2 copies of Path to Exile. Path is really not that great against our deck. We don't have that many creatures that we really care about getting pathed. So we're just going to take the Goyf, even though we have answers for Goyf also. The Damnation we cannot take, even if we wanted to. So our opponent's hand actually is not that great. If we draw a third land, we are in good shape. But let's see here. Okay, so third land. Alright, that's a bit of a relief for sure. So we have an option here. We can Painful Truce or we can Crucible. I think we want to go ahead and cast the Painful Truce. And then next turn we can cast the Crucible if we want to. And now we have Ghost Quarter, so we can potentially lock our opponent out later with Crucible plus Ghost Quarter. And so we're going to go ahead and play the Crucible here. And I think for now we just want to rebuy our fetch land in the graveyard and get that incremental value. Since we do want to be accelerating our own land drops. But we're in a pretty solid spot here, for sure. That being said, we haven't drawn anything that's capable of pressuring our opponent. So I'm fine with just playing out the Ghost Quarters now. And if our opponent draws something like a Lingering Souls, that is definitely going to be bad news for us. If Liliana of the Veil, we have an answer to in hand in Dreadbore. We really would like one of our Planeswalkers to show up here. Alright, there's an Inquisition, so we can fire that off. We'll see if our opponent's drawn anything recently. Okay, Aven Mind Sensor is a card our opponent has picked up here. We could get rid of the Aven Mind Sensor, or we can get rid of the Path. I guess we get rid of the Mind Sensor, although it's not really doing all that much. And we see that our opponent has a bunch of removal in hand, but none of that removal deals with Planeswalkers. And we are playing 8 Planeswalkers in our deck, so it's pretty unusual that we haven't actually drawn one yet. And, alright, we're just going to grab a Path to Exile here. And we can replay this Bloodstained Mire from the graveyard. But this game we're definitely favored in the game. Crucible gives us a pretty big long-term advantage. So we're running out of lands here, and at this point, we should be looking to potentially start ghost quartering our opponent's stuff. So I think we just get rid of the Hissing Quagmire here and start regrowing our Ghost Quarter. Yeah, I like that. We don't need to play the Shambling Vents because our opponent has a bunch of removal in hand. And we can think about trying to keep our opponent off white. So we see right now our opponent has 3 white sources in play. Alright, here's a Scavenging Ooze. So we may just want to go ahead and terminate that. And our opponent is smartly going to eat our Bloodstained Mire. But, yeah, I think we just go ahead and terminate the Scavenging Ooze here. We could wait to terminate it, but we might as well just go ahead and get the value from the terminate right away. And I think we just want to go ahead and start trying to cut our opponent off lands. So we're going to start firing off the Ghost Quarters here. If our opponent does draw specifically another Ooze, then we would get a little bit punished for this play, but just cutting our opponent completely off of white seems smart. We know that our opponent has white cards in hand. And there's a Liliana. Okay, that's pretty good. So we're going to be discarding a card here. Not really a big deal. We are probably going to want to Dreadbore this Liliana. And we drew our own Lily, which is great. So let's go ahead and play our own copy of Liliana. And we don't mind discarding excess lands really at all. Now we can Dreadbore our opponent's Lily. And it looks like our opponent did pitch a copy of Path to Exile. So I think we still just want to go ahead and continue on with the Ghost Quarter lock, basically. But we don't need to fire off the Ghost Quarter right now, because if our opponent does draw another Ooze, we want to at least have one Ghost Quarter still in play. So yeah, it looks like that was good enough. So pretty weird game there. We didn't draw a Planeswalker until very late. But we were able to basically rely on Crucible of Worlds to get the job done. And it looks like one card I actually wasn't thinking about enough, sorry about that, was Go for the Throat. We actually do want to board this card in for this matchup. And we saw there how the cards like Lightning Bolt and Inquisition weren't super great. We were still getting into these top deck wards. So I'm fine with taking out an Inquisition. I like leaving in the 2 Angers because if our opponent had a Lingering Souls, we would have absolutely needed Anger of the Gods if we were going to win that game. So, I think this seems fine. Yeah, I mean, maybe we just play the Inquisition instead of a Relic. Let's try this because we don't want to exile our own lands if we have a Crucible in play. But the card we're most scared of is our opponent just resolving a turn 3 Liliana of the Veil. We don't have all that many ways to answer it. Dreadbore is the best one. And we saw how in game 1 that Liliana just was a huge problem for us. If our opponent doesn't have the Lily, I think we're definitely ahead. This is a tough hand, a really tough hand. We're on the draw with only 1 land, first of all. We do have an Inquisition which we can cast. We also have multiple copies of Wall of Omens which can help hold down the fort. I think I'm feeling a little bit like making a risky keep. So we'll see. Every card matters in this type of matchup. We definitely are going to need to draw 1 more land over the next couple turns. So we can fire off the Inquisitions to get things going. And we're definitely going to want an Inquisition here whether or not we draw another land. So we did not draw a land. That's unfortunate. And it looks like our opponent's hand is pretty dry here. So we're going to take the Abrupt Decay and leave our opponent with a Kalitas. Alright, we got there with a land. So now we can cast the Wall of Omens and get some redraws. So we drew the 3rd land. Okay. So we are officially in business. If our opponent simply slams down Kalitas here, I think we want to actually just play our Liliana and minus it here. And just get rid of that Kalitas. So, yep. Seems like the correct play. We do have to be aware of the fact that our opponent has a copy of Tectonic Edge in their hand. However, we have our Crucible, so we're not that worried about that type of card. We can just rebuy our lands. So our opponent's firing up Hissing Quagmire, and we can just go ahead and chump block, essentially, with the Wall of Omens here. And Lingering Souls is a pretty good card to have in this spot. So the question is, what do we want to discard to the Liliana? I think it might be the Lingering Souls. We could make a play like Wall of Omens plus Lingering Souls, which is pretty nice. We could also just Tectonic Edge away our opponent's Hissing Quagmire, which I kind of like doing that. So let's go ahead and plus here. We could also just discard a land, but I think I like just discarding the souls here. So yeah, our opponent just pitched a land, which is to be expected. So let's get rid of that Quagmire and flash back our Lingering Souls. Not positive that was correct, but either way, I think we're in a commanding position. Here's a Leyline of the Void. Okay. So that's actually pretty good here. It's going to shut off a lot of our graveyard stuff. We can still regrow our Tectonic Edge in our graveyard, but it's going to stop us from doing any more graveyard shenanigans. So I like just plussing the Lily. We're going to discard this Inquisition. It's not really doing much here. And it looked like our opponent actually pitched Tectonic Edge. Interesting. Alright, well, let's just go ahead and make sure we get our Tectonic Edge back. So, well, we still can. So pretty happy that we actually used that Tectonic Edge before the Leyline came down so that we were able to get some value off of it. And here's a Tarmogoyf. So we've got a couple of different ways we can answer the Goyf. And I think we want to actually just go ahead and terminate it. And we can just continue on upticking Liliana. And okay, so it looks like our opponent had a Liliana of their own, but was forced to discard that Liliana. So things are definitely looking pretty good. I think we still want to play our Blackcleave Cliffs and just pass the turn. And I think getting our opponent off of 5 mana is pretty important. Even though that Tech Edge we are not able to rebuy here. And there's an additional copy of Liliana in case our opponent does draw something like a Maelstrom Pulse or an Abrupt Decay. That could actually become important to have that backup copy. Here is a Lingering Souls. That's pretty good. It's definitely not bad. But we're just going to try to hang on to... We're just going to try to hang on to this Liliana here. So if our opponent doesn't draw anything, we can just simply block with our spirits and then ultimate Liliana. So we're going to be able to ultimate Liliana this turn. So I think we're in a great spot. So, yep, let's go ahead and just ultimate here. And we're going to have to figure out exactly how we want to do this. So, I think we want to separate the spirits. And, alright, we're going to have to separate the Leyline. Let's see. If our opponent has the Leyline in play, We don't really want the Leyline in play, so I actually like 1 land Leyline and a Spirit. Let's try this. If our opponent takes the 3 lands, we can still just start getting rid of those lands with the Ghost Quarter. Alright, so it looks like the Leyline is going to bite the dust. So we can start just going ahead and trying to get rid of our opponent's lands with the Ghost Quarter now. And we can play our backup copy of Lily. And we'll give our opponent a draw step here. So there's the basic forest and a Tarmogoyf, but we can answer that pretty easily. So, gonna probably have to play a little bit faster. This game has been drawing out for a while. So I'm going to go ahead and discard this Lingering Souls and then flash it back. And it looks like that's going to be enough. So that is the match.